Okay, be seated in the courtroom, please. All right, members of the jury, when we recessed, the defense was in its closing argument. You may proceed.
May I please report, Judge? Closing counsel. I think what we're all struggling with is how could one person do such a horrific and evil act to those children? And it's real. I mean, we're all thinking it. We're not immune from it. Everyone's thinking that. And the issue is that generates emotion. This has been an emotional trial. I can only imagine what it is to the families, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. I know it's been emotional for you. We've been watching you, rightfully so. It's been emotional to you. It's been emotional to us as well. Do you not think that burly man, when he goes home and he gave you that story about his son, that he's not digging his face in his chest, weeping? I have permission to say this because he did. Weeping. Do you not think that Gary, when he's doing FaceTime with his twins, that he stays on a little bit longer or lets them call past their bedtime so he can talk to them, never knowing if that's that last time? Do you not think that Michelle doesn't rush home to go to her granddaughter's games? Because she does. It's emotional for all of us. Or Joseph, and he gets away and disappears at the house that we're staying in because he wants to talk to his children, making sure they're okay. I shared with you in jury selection the journey my parents went on and my family went on with the murder of my brother in our driveway. Do you not think that when I close my eyes that I don't rethink picking up my mom off the ground in our driveway, loading my brother's body on the gurney after they finished the investigation and helping my pop wash off my brother's blood in our driveway? There's nothing like a mama's cry. Nothing like a mom's cry. You can't explain it. Nothing compares to it. And that's real. And we don't ignore that. It's never been us against the family. It's never been Adrian against the family. It's been a pursuit for truth. Remember the totality of the circumstances? It's a pursuit for truth. And because this has been so emotional, the only way that can be dealt with in a justice system is through a jury trial. I love a jury trial. I love the justice system. Thomas Jefferson, as we talked about in jury selection, we talked about Thomas Jefferson. This has a little bit of a delay. I consider trial by jury as the only anchor ever yet imagined by man, by which the government can be held to the principles of its constitution. One of our founding fathers believed that. I do. In a system of the people, by the people, and for the people, you're the equalizer. You're the one that has the final say. With all due respect to the judge, who I respect very much, not him, not the bailiffs, not the government for sure, not even the defense, it's you. It's the people. And that's why I love a jury trial. And it deals with the emotion. It's the only way to balance this emotion and reason. And I say this respectfully as I can. They're trying to hijack your emotion to circumvent your reason. That's what they're trying to do. That they're your emotions, but they're being hijacked. And we know that. So how do you deal with that? Because in a world where we don't agree on anything, we definitely don't agree on politics. We don't agree on worldview and religion. We don't agree on definitions. Most people agree, no matter where you're at, most people agree that we don't want innocent people convicted and punished. Most people agree on that. And the only way we do that is through the justice system. And the representative of that is Lady Justice. She represents the justice system. Not Lady Liberty, it's Lady Justice. And this comes back from the Greek times, the Roman times, where there was a polytheistic society and there was Greek gods, and she was the god. I don't believe in Greek gods or goddesses, but she was the goddess of order. The justice system is supposed to bring order to a society. And everything means something on this symbol, right? The blindfold means something. She doesn't look at politics. She doesn't look on whether you're a Hindu or Buddhist or Islamic or atheist or agnostic or that I'm a Christian. She doesn't look at any of that stuff. What she does is she tries to get the facts and the law and merge them together to reach this elusive concept called justice. The sword. The sword represents strength. The justice system has to be strong. There's something called the death penalty and life imprisonment. That's in the justice system. So the justice system should have a sword aspect to it. And then her foot's on a book, because you have to have a command of the law right? You have to know the law and have a commandment to dispense it properly. And her foot is on the book as she controls the law. And regardless of your religion or your worldview, the universal symbol of a serpent is evil. And the justice system should smash out evil in a society, true evil in a society. But yet she has those scales. And these scales are important. These scales say, I don't care about those cameras. These scales say, I don't care about the false narrative that's been out there. These scales say, I don't care about all the resources of the government. The scales even say, it doesn't even matter what the judge thinks. The scales says is we have to balance all that out, look at everything, and come find this concept called justice. And I love it. I love her. I loved her when I was a DA myself in Bexar County, as we talked about, when I made death penalty decisions, when Jason and I were prosecuting murders. I loved it. I love it as a defense attorney, sitting at that table, either defending people innocent like Adrian of an allegation by the government with all the resources. I love it. And in a world that has this dichotomy and this battle, the justice system brings us all together with a blindfold, not made of mesh, and not lifted up when it's convenient. It stays on the whole time. And so this is the point, though. This is the point in a trial, in a jury trial. This is the point in our justice system where Lady Justice takes the scales and she hands them to you. And now you have them. And that's what we're arguing to you. And that's what we've presented to you. And so all of this gets me to a point of where I'm in a dilemma. Let me tell you what my dilemma is. My dilemma is that I'm a passionate person, if you haven't noticed. And my passion, I think, can be a strength, but can also be a weakness. And so I wonder to myself, if I look like I haven't slept, it's because I haven't. Did I do too much? Was I too passionate? Was I too aggressive? Or did I not do enough? Did I not ask the right questions? Should I have gone even harder? And I struggle with that. But my dilemma is I can't apologize for it. And I won't be fake. And I won't tell you something that I don't believe. I haven't done that since jury selection. I won't start now. And so I can't apologize for it. And because I can't apologize for it, all I can do is ask you for grace. Just extend some grace to me. So if I've done anything, if Jason's done anything, if Gary's done anything to offend you, please, you don't have to now, you have to, please hold it against me or Jason or Gary, not against Adrian, okay? So that's what I'm asking you to do for us. And so we have to look at things, because what came up during the trial, and at the beginning when I told you, is there was a concept called totality of the circumstances, right? This case, ultimately, we're going to consider everything, allegedly. We want you to consider everything. But this case boils down, truly, to 1 minute and 48 seconds. Not 3.5 minutes, not 77 minutes, to 1 minute and 48 seconds. And it came up during the trial. And so Jason talked to, how do we know that? I'm not making that up. I'm going to their charging document. I'm going to their instrument that they charged Adrian. It goes up until after the shooter entered the room, 111 and 112. Until the active shooter shot at one or more, one child or children in rooms 111. So until it's from when it's from showed up at this, it's from as the shooters, and until that shooter goes into those rooms and does what he did to those children. So we have times on that. That's what I'm saying. We have times. We know. Remember this? It's over here, but we took a picture of it. So Adrian parks. It's not contested. Adrian parks at 11:31:55. He parks. We'll talk about what he was responding to and how other people responded and how Adrian responded as he's going to what he thought was the danger. And we'll talk about shots fired. That's true. He calls shots fired because he hears them himself. But he parks at 11:31:55. He's not at 11:31:55 knows what's going on. At 11:31:55, he doesn't have a full concept of what's happening. He just parks at 11:31:55. And the shooter enters the building at 11:32:58. That's 1 minute and 3 seconds. And then some time goes by, 22 seconds later, he's shooting at those doors, and then 20 seconds later, he's in. If you add it all up, it's 1 minute and 48 seconds. That's what their indictment says. It's not 3.5 minutes. It's 1 minute and 48 seconds. Parked, enter the building. That's it. And then there's 22 seconds later, and then he enters again. 11:33:43. This is when he enters room 111. This is where we get the extra 45 seconds. And that's why I say 1 minute and 48 seconds. I'm going by facts that you've heard. They're charging in. No one's making things up on our side. Okay? All know what happened there. Give me 1 second. It held down on purpose.
Yeah, just back it.
I'm trying. Give me 1 second, guys. Okay. Okay, so here's what the government wants you to compare Adrian's actions to others. So let's do that. And that's all we were doing during the trial. We were asking questions. We got permission. I mean, Mr. Espinosa sat to your right, and then Mr. Starbeck over your right shoulder, sir. And we asked everybody permission. For where you were sitting, Mr. Peña was between you two. And we remember in jury selection, we talked about that. And we got permission from you to be able to ask tough questions. Even about sensitive matters. We did. And everyone said yes. So let's compare some actions. We're going to compare the actions of Mendoza, Saucedo, Coronado, and eventually Hill. And yes, they could figure that out during trial, so of course we're going to talk about it. So just to lay the ground, you guys know this already. So here's an aerial view. We can't even see Adrian's car. It's so much to the southeast side. But Coronado, Mendoza, Saucedo are on this side, a little bit outside of it. You've seen this picture multiple times. This is the scene. Here's a better view. We can see Adrian's car way over here. He's driving into the eye of the storm. Many witnesses said that. He drove all the way to the back. And then we had those 3 officers still at the corner. Here's the west door, and here's where the shooter was shooting. We have evidence of that, and then he enters this door at 11:32:48. So let's compare Adrian and Officer Mendoza. Adrian drove into danger. Officer Mendoza stayed away at the perimeter. Adrian had no line of sight, not contested. Christina's not going to come up here and tell you that he had line of sight. Mendoza was the same side. He was on the same side as the shooter. Adrian was alone. Mendoza had backup. Adrian was one of the first 5 in the building. Remember, we're going to talk about that first 5. Because remember Joe Vasquez and others talked about that first 5 and what they did and what they potentially prevented. Mendoza enters the east door at the east door, even though he's on the west side, the east door at 11:42:48. But before that, he drives away, not towards the gunfire. When he's facing the door, when he's looking, when he has backup, and someone has an AR-15, we're going to talk about Saucedo next, he drives away, not towards the gunfire. Remember that pretzel that Jason's talking about? There's one of them. Let's do some more comparisons, because they're going to compare Adrian to everybody else. Adrian and Officer Saucedo. Adrian drove into danger. Officer Saucedo stayed away at the perimeter. Adrian, no line of sight. Saucedo saw the shooter, and we're going to look at the video in a second, and asked to shoot. Adrian, alone. Saucedo, God bless you, has backup. Adrian has a handgun only. Saucedo has an AR-15 rifle. Adrian, one of the first 5 in the building. Saucedo never goes in the building. After having line of sight, opportunity and ability to do something, and he doesn't. He never goes in the building. And he also drives away, not towards the gunfire. But let's look at this. This is the dashboard of Coronado. Here's the sergeant. Mendoza's here. They set up perimeter. They're acting as if they're being shot at, but there's no evidence. There's no defects. There's no objective evidence they got shot at. Here's Saucedo. There's a long rifle. Watch his behavior. Watch him aim. And watch him do this point. He's there. He's there. There he is. He had aimed him. He saw. He's pointing at him. He's there. And then they saw him walk into the building, so they leave. We're coming back to this video.
There's no evidence that's a misstatement of the facts, Your Honor.
No, it's not, Judge.
I'm going to object. I want it on the record that he's misstating facts to the jury.
Okay, once again, ladies and gentlemen, what they say in argument's not evidence. If it differs from your own recollection, rely on your own. You may proceed.
It's in evidence, guys. I asked questions. I was very specific about questions. I gave people opportunities to talk. I wasn't trying to be a bulldog on anybody. Maybe you can think I was on Ranger Hill. We'll talk about that in a second. But we're just asking. We were just asking questions, specific questions, not general ones. Okay. So let's talk about Officer Coronado, Sergeant Coronado. Adrian drove into danger. Sarge, stayed away at the perimeter. Adrian, no line of sight. Sarge, same side as the shooter. Adrian, alone. Coronado has backup. Adrian, frantic witness he was dealing with. Coronado, frantic witness he was dealing with Claudia. Remember that? We're gonna look at the video again and you'll see it. Adrian, unfortunately, and again, we're not ragging on her, okay? You saw me cross her. But she was wrong, and we'll talk about so many things that she was inaccurate about. A frantic witness that was wrong and inaccurate because she was on the wrong side of this issue. But the frantic witness, Claudia, the sergeant, on the same side, was accurate. Because you know why? Because she said, he went in the building. He went in the building. And you see the video yourself that they're acting like they knew he went in the building. Because you don't go from this, thinking you're being shot at, to this unless you know that the danger's gone and they're in the building. You saw the video yourself, and we're going to watch it again. Sergeant Coronado unfortunately drives away, not towards the gunfire. So now we're going to watch it again, but now we're going to focus on Sergeant Coronado, okay? This is him again. We already looked at Saucedo's behavior. Look who he's talking to. He's yelling at somebody. That's Claudia. You go inside. Okay. What? They're talking. She testified. I told them he went in the building. And guess what? He acts like he knew he went in the building. Because you don't go from ducking like that to watch his car drive off. Watch all of them. They all know he went in the building. They don't believe what they're trying to prosecute. There's no way. Our defense is not, well, if you're going to prosecute Adrian, prosecute other people. They don't believe it themselves. You can't. I'm going to go through a list in a little while of all the things that they're going to have to, Christina, with all due respect, is going to have to come up here and tell you to ignore to get to the man at the bottom of the totem pole. I'm going to show you that list, and I'll be right, humbly, but I'll be right. Where's Randy Hill? I know it bothers them, because he's the one dispatched. Why didn't they call him? Why didn't they call Saucedo? So we can ask them questions and bring you answers. The government has all the resources, all the rangers, this whole road. They have the whole government of Texas and all the resources to bring you evidence. And we expect that of them. Where's Randy Hill? Where's Mendoza? Where's Saucedo? None of them. The only reason why they brought Coronado is because they wanted that video in. He's dispatched at 11:29:36, 3 minutes before the shooter enters into the building. What was 911 told? That is another aspect of it, Bill. And Bill's right. I mean, he could hear. He's an intelligent man, and tremendous respect for him. But he heard our questions. I mean, that's a factor. We have to. If we're looking at the totality, what were they told? What information did they all have? Someone shooting a gun. This is what Mr. Limon is told, dispatch. They just shot at us. He's shooting at the school. That wasn't relayed to anybody. He's jumping into the schoolyard. Wasn't relayed to anybody. He's just jumped over the fence. Still wasn't relayed to anybody. He's running towards the school. Nobody knew that, but that nobody knew that includes Adrian. That includes Adrian. He's wearing black. No one knew that. That would have been helpful to know. But we know for sure, and I know Ranger Hill's here. He can come sit right here if he wants to. I asked him, you don't know, I know when he showed up on the scene. You do? It wasn't in your critical timeline. Well, it's in a different timeline that he gave to them, didn't give to us. Interesting. But so in his critical timeline that he didn't review for 3 years before he sat in front of you and testified to this, he said that that's all that's in his critical timeline. Not when Randy Hill supposedly showed up, because Randy Hill didn't check in at location. Let me know what's going on. Nothing. No communication. So all we have in the first critical timeline is this. Randy Hill at 11:33:32. Just standing there. Setting up. Did you hear how difficult it was for him to try to make up an excuse for what Randy Hill's behavior was? Did you hear how difficult it was? Because you couldn't objectively do it. Not based off Nico standards or Jason standards, just training standards, tactics. I asked him tactical questions. How does this make sense? Well, he was just there momentarily. Where's that? I don't understand where you're getting this from. What we know for sure is that Sergeant Coronado is driving around the school, and there's Randy Hill. He's already out of his car. He's been there for a little while. I don't know how much it is. The ranger thought he knew. I don't know how. But there he is, setting up perimeter when nobody's asked him to set up perimeter. Oh, they said there's a dispatch, again, that we didn't get from an unknown person. Remember that exchange? Figure it out.
I'm going to object. This is misleading the jury, and he's having them believe that we did not turn over everything to him, and it's
Okay.
objection.
Overruled.
Remember that exchange? I was just asking questions based off the evidence that we were looking at. I let him, what are you looking at, so I can ask you about what you have in front of you. There was no trick question, no gotcha. I told him I'm not going to question your character, but I will question your opinions. I'm going to question your investigation. He knew that. He knew that. He's coming before you after 3 years of all of this and the resources, 3 years, and that's what they brought you? That's the mortar to their case, Ranger Hill? Bringing it all together in his critical timeline? Well, where's Randy Hill? We all want to hear from Randy Hill. And then we have a hero, a true hero, Joe Vasquez. You heard about Joe. I mean, he gave me permission to call him Joe. He called me whatever he wants to, but we went through scenarios. We went through breaching. We talked about when you breach an outward swinging door versus inward swinging door. Well, what did Joe tell us? At 11:56:28, he linked up with Lieutenant Gonzales, who briefed him. Very different when you're being briefed by fellow cops after the situation has already been assessed. Very different, but they want to conflate that to Adrian. Well, they did that. They listened to instructions. They moved in. You have 27 officers around you. Everybody has guns and helmets and vests on and AR-15s and said, here's what's going on. And oh, yeah, of course they're going to listen. That wasn't Adrian. I asked if he wanted me to make entry. He didn't do. He asked. He understands there's an order. He understands the danger of it. We talked about the danger of it and fatal funnels, and there was 2 of them. There was the hallway, and then there was the actual doorway. We talked about that. Response, no, we're trying to negotiate because we've been fired at. That's what he was told. Waited with Canales for negotiating team and the TAC team. So a true hero. I hope you like Joe, because I like Joe. I mean, he waited. There was still sporadic shooting at times. We look at the timelines, the critical timeline that's kind of complete. But he waited with Canales for the negotiation and the TAC team. Should Joe be sitting in that chair? Is Joe a coward? Are board TAC a coward? Are all the other officers cowards? Eventually, board TAC showed up. It was a bit of a blur. He doesn't remember it. A lot was going on. Then they had a planning. They planned the entry. How long did you wait there? I asked them that. They entered at 12:50:01, almost an hour after he arrived. So Joe Vasquez is a real hero. He thought his daughter was in there. Could have been in there because she went to school there. But he still waited an hour because he knows there's a pecking order. He knows there's a way. He understands fatal funnels. He said you're going to die at the door. That's what he said. We got that from Joe, not from us. And he waited because they were planning entry. Part of their training too. Waited 50 minutes, over 50 minutes. But board TAC was rehearsing and opening the door. And again, I'm not saying that's good or bad. That's what part of their training, because an open, outward swinging doors is difficult and it's dangerous. But they had the equipment at that time. Adrian didn't. The first 5 didn't. Taking cover is reasonable. Then we asked them about Adrian's behavior, because they didn't bring an expert, so we had to ask somebody, and we're going to ask somebody who's in law enforcement. Well, taking cover is reasonable if you don't know where the shots are coming from. From Joe, their witness. Containment. Remember I asked about containment? We talked about that. And he said, if those first 5 officers, we call them the first 5, if the first 5 hadn't contained the shooter, he could have done the same thing to the whole school. Think about that. When he didn't contain, he didn't do anything to distract or detain or to impede. That first 5 group held them in 111 and 112. And let me submit to you humbly. If it wasn't for that first 5, that person responsible, because I know I've called him an animal and I know I've called him a monster, because he is. You know, you get the point. But if it wasn't for that first 5, what would have stopped him from finishing off those precious babies in 112? Was it a distraction? He knew there was talking, there's negotiating, he waiting for them. He wants to be a cop killer too. I mean, he wants to be a cop killer, so he's distracted. He's done damage he's done what he's done in 111. He did what he did in 112. But what would have stopped him to finish everybody off? The 5 outside, knowing that they could breach at any time. He doesn't know what they're doing. And he was waiting in that closet. He knows that closet, remember? 111 was his home room. He was going to 111. He went to school there. 111 was his homeroom. He knew that room. But even Joe Vasquez said, if those first 5 hadn't contained the shooter, and by the way, and I know it bothers them, Adrian's part of that first 5. And not that 3.5 minutes that Christina's going to come up and argue, that minute and 48 seconds with no line of sight. Talking to the guy on the stick. He was talking to the guy on the stick. Remember that stick is the stack when they're breaching behind the shield? He said he couldn't hear me because I realized I was wearing a gas mask. He himself was experiencing perception distortion. He didn't even realize he had a gas mask on. There was no gas, but he put it on, and he couldn't hear, and he's talking, he's like, oh, wait, what am I doing with this gas mask on? And so he took it off to talk, but he didn't realize it at the time. But everybody, it's okay for everybody else except for Adrian, because he's the man on the bottom on the totem pole. He's easy pickings. Except for you guys, to settle that. Now let's talk about Mel Flores. Look, I mean, if you couldn't tell that I had an affinity for her because she's a special ed teacher, then you weren't paying attention. I have a special needs son, and I told her that, and I appreciate that. And it takes a special person to spend 25 years teaching and taking care of and nurturing and stewarding special needs children. No one is attacking her character. But she came in almost 7 days after the event. She admitted she's watching these cameras and reading the stories and listening to talk, and that's human, that's normal. She wasn't given an order by the judge or anybody else not to talk to anybody, but that was influencing her talk. And so, but she's witness 1. She's in their indictment. The training and then witness 1, based off what she said. She thought the shooter had a handgun. She was sure of it, but he didn't have a handgun. Did not see the windows break on the east side of the building. I could not see from where I was, but Bill, in opening statements, expected you to say that she did. Why? Because that puts Adrian in a disadvantaged position. But then the truth came out during cross-examination, right? Remember we talked about that in jury selection? The greatest vehicle ever invented to find the truth, I was taught, is cross-examination. It's in Proverbs as well. Because we had to, and we asked you, and you know, I told you that direct examination for the government was going to be like a waltz, and then cross-examination was going to be like a dental visit, pulling teeth, and I think you saw that. It wasn't our intent. We can't control the way the witnesses respond, but some of them were very honest. State Exhibit 921 identifies the wrong PD vehicle. She identified the wrong PD vehicle. She identified Sergeant Page's vehicle. She ID'd Donald Page. Khaki pants, Adrian didn't have khaki pants on. Full beard, Adrian didn't have a full beard. You saw the interview. Short sleeves, white short sleeve shirt. Adrian wasn't wearing white short sleeve shirt. We believe she saw Sergeant Page, but she also testified that she was frantic. Yes, I was. Let me submit to you respectfully. Again, this is nothing against Ms. Flores. God bless her. Let me submit to you that you heard the 911 call from Mr. Limones. You heard Amy Marin's 911 call. Understandably, it's frantic in the background. You heard Claudia in the background of Mr. Limones' 911 call. Ms. Flores was more like that. Adrian's dealing with that type of franticness. Understandably, again, it's not a criticism, it's just an observation. He was pacing. Remember we talked about that? Assessing because you're shouting, yes, there's shouting, south entrance, west entrance, shots fired, and we'll talk about when he transmits something in a second at 11:32:59. She was with Adrian from 2 to 7 minutes. You can't cherry pick what you want to believe from her, Christina. You just can't do that. Or you shouldn't do that. It's not right. It's not fair. I mean, so we know it couldn't have been 7 minutes because the timelines don't work out. The stuff that we do know, it couldn't have been 7 minutes. But even if it's 2 minutes, it covers the 1 minute 48 seconds that Adrian had no eyesight on the shooter. He had no opportunity. He didn't have the ability. He's with her. She's a victim/witness at the time, yelling, frantic, giving instructions. He's taking shots. He's looking around. He's taking cover. See, it's okay for everyone else to take cover but Adrian. For a minute, he can't take cover for a minute to observe, orient, decide, and then act. Remember their training? But she's going to have to come up here and tell you it's okay for Coronado, for Saucedo, and for Mendoza to take cover, and then run from the shooting, run from the gunfire. Make a note, run from the gunfire, not run to the gunfire.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to the sidebar comment.
Sustain.
So she's going to have to argue that to you. And I don't know how you do it in good conscience. I just don't know how you do that. But 2 to 7 minutes, it's a big deal. That's a big deal because it came out in evidence, and you should consider that. And the reason why it's in the big deal, I want to say this because I asked Ranger Hill. I said, well, why isn't that in your timeline? Why didn't you know that information? I go, would that have been important? And he said, yes, it would have been important. So good for you for answering that way, because it's true. It would have been important. For him to assess critical, important, his definition, important timeline, 2 to 7 minutes with a witness / potential victim, it matters in your assessment of someone's behavior and what they didn't do and what they were actually doing. Excuse me. Shots being fired while with Adrian Gonzales. Yes, while they're together. So now he has somebody he has to protect as well. And himself and her, and think about it. He has no idea that this person's going, he doesn't know that. There's no evidence that he knew he was going in the building. He's going in the building, Adrian. There's no evidence of that. He couldn't even see this guy. And we said pacing could be taking cover. She says, I'm sure. Said the shooter went in the south door but pointed to the west side. Yes, I did. And then in her interview, the investigator, the ranger, had to say he did not go in the south side. Oh, I really thought he did. And she was honest about it. I really thought she was mistaken. She just was inaccurate. At the time, he thought the shooter went in the south door, yes. Told him the 4th grade building. He said, what building? He doesn't even know that. He's not part of that. He's assigned to the high school. He didn't even know which building you're talking about. Yes, I just wasn't listening, she said, because there was a lot going on for her. That's understandable. Then said he's on the west side of the building. Yes. So south side entrance, west side building, yes. Dialogue between you two was 2 to 7 minutes, yes. So here we go. Adrian with her 2 to 7 minutes. Shots being fired while with Adrian, yes. You say pacing could have been taking cover, yes. Said shooter went in the south, yes. At the time you thought the shooter went in the south door, I did, yes. Told him 4th grade building, he said what building, yes. So there's confusion there. Not confusion like he's confused. He's trying to figure things out. He doesn't even know where she doesn't even know where she's directing him to. And again, there's a lot going on for her. Dialogue, yes. I just wasn't listening. Now we have Ranger Nick Hill. And I'm going to temper. I'm sorry, Christine. I didn't mean to be disrespectful to you. I apologize. I'm going to temper myself. I really believe, with all due respect, Ranger, I really do believe that Thomas Jefferson was talking about someone like Ranger Hill. And I'm saying that with him in the room. I consider trial by jury, you, as the only anchor ever yet imagined by man, by which the government, including him, the government, can be held to the principles of its constitution, and one of those principles is due process. You know what due process means? It means fundamental fair play. Fundamental fair play. Everybody gets it. Remember that blindfold? It doesn't. We don't do this. Doesn't apply to you. Can apply to you. Doesn't apply to you, sir. Applies to you, ma'am. It doesn't work that way. That's not how Lady Justice operates. That's why she's so beautiful. She wears that blindfold at all time. I'm not going to go over all of Ranger Hill's testimony and our back and forth. And again, if I offended you by my question of him, please hold it against me. I can only ask you to do that and extend some grace to me. But like Jason said, this was his presentation to you, in good conscience. This was, and if you had not known any better, if we didn't ask questions, if we didn't push back, you would think that the shooter was right there, and then he just drove right by him. That's it. And then he placed the shooter where the shells were, and then we went through the whole ejection thing. Remember that? And it was at versus towards, and can you look at two people, and how many fingers am I holding up? We went through a whole bunch of stuff, and I just asking pretty simple questions. But that's how he presented it to you, and that's not the facts. Jason told you. We know that because we have some video, grainy, yes, but we have video. But more importantly, we have Claudia, who he interviewed. He didn't review someone else's interview. He interviewed her. And not only does she, but also Mr. Limones, and even Amy Marin loses the shooter in between cars. He's in between cars. That's where he should have been if he was going to present that to you, this animation. But the government sponsored him anyway. Now, whether they knew or didn't realize it, I don't know. I'm not inside their minds, and that's between them. But they sponsored him anyway. So what is Christina going to come here and say to you? 3 minutes. She'll say 3.5 maybe. Okay, because Bill kind of gave you the heads up on that. Didn't follow training. Well, Jason went over the training, so I asked him a lot of questions. I talked about tactics with him. He was a very, very nice man. He agreed. Just my opinion. I'm one opinion of many. There's different. These are suggestions, and I said, I understand. Thank you, sir. Very respectful. Didn't follow training. Then we showed you the training. We don't recommend going in alone. But we're not even saying Adrian made that conscious decision, by the way. We're talking about 1 minute 48 seconds. had an opportunity, best opportunity. I mean, Ranger Hill, over the three in the corner, said that Adrian had a better opportunity to stop that shooter than Coronado, Saucedo, and Mendoza. You're the judge of the credibility. That's why you're here. That's why I love the jury section, the jury trial. And here's what they're going to do. They didn't say it, but they're saying it. They're trying to feed you a coward sandwich. They want you to eat a big coward sandwich and say that Adrian's the one that gave it to you. The problem is, it is wrapped around 2 slices of bread of bravery. That's the problem. You have this coward sandwich, but you have bravery and bravery around it. The bravery of driving into trouble, thinking there was a shooter. Only one, didn't set up perimeter, goes into the trouble, into the eye of the storm. And then he's one of the first 5 that goes in the building. Takes rounds, what Martinez does, takes rounds, and you saw the video. Adrian has his weapon out, he doesn't move. Page is there, he's in the fatal funnel. All that shooter needed to do was turn this way and start shooting at them. He didn't run away. He only went outside when his radio didn't break, because the radios don't work inside of schools, which is interesting. And so then he had to go outside to call for SWAT, call for cover. Everybody's doing that. It's for the cover for the situation, not for him. That wasn't accurate. And then what Bill told you in opening is that Adrian, if you listen to Bill's opening, and again, this is respectfully, you would think that Adrian showed up and just stayed there and stood there. If you remember opening, I don't know if you do or don't, but that he just stood there and didn't do anything. And the evidence didn't play that out. The only thing Adrian remained in, he remained in danger. He went into the danger and remained. Once he figured things out, he went further into danger and remained. That's the only thing he remained in. And they're going to ask you to send the message. Jason couldn't help himself. He had to talk about it, and I understand. The problem is the message that will be sent is be Officer Hill. Set up perimeter, even though you're not asked to set up perimeter. Don't go in. Don't go into the eye of the storm. Don't even wait 30 minutes. Stand back. Don't do anything, because I don't want to be sitting in that chair. That's the message that will be sent. Not just to Uvalde County, but also to Nueces County, Bexar County, because people are watching. And that's the message that would be sent. That's not the message that needs to be sent. They need training. They need good training. They need proper training. They need resources. They need help from those schools to work with them in conjunction. And we'll talk about doors being locked here in a second. And they're all working synergistically together to protect the most precious thing we have in our community, and that's our children. No doubt about that. But to pick the man lowest on the totem pole and drag him into court and to come before you, there's a lot of things they're going to have to ask you to ignore. They're going to have to ask you to ignore inaccurate dispatch. They have to. I'm not saying it's their fault, but they're going to have to ask you to ignore it. They're going to have to ask you to ignore that Adrian drove into danger. Remember that sandwich? They're going to say, yeah, okay, the bread is fine, but the coward sandwich is full in the middle. And then, yeah, I understand the bread at the end is bravery, but we just want you to focus on what's in the middle. It's like an Oreo where you take off the up top. They want you to have the coward cream in the middle. Remained in danger. They're going to have to ask you to ignore that he remained in danger. That he had no line of sight. They're going to have to ask you to ignore that. He never had a line of sight. But other officers did, not him. They're going to have to ask you to ignore that it was truly, because I looked at the indictment and we're looking at the facts, it's truly 1 minute and 48 seconds. They're going to have to ask you to ignore that. She's going to argue something different, and give her your attention, please. They're going to have to ask you to ignore that. They're going to have to ask you to ignore Mendoza, who showed up 27, 28 seconds after Adrian. That's it. That's the difference. He was there too, before the shooter made it in, with line of sight, with backup, with guns, with superior weapons. They're going to have to ask you to ignore Saucedo. Line of sight, never goes in, drives away. You saw the video yourself on the dash cam. They're going to have to ask you to ignore Sergeant Coronado. They're going to have to ask you to ignore Randy Hill. They're going to have to ask you to ignore building doors being unlocked. Everybody, Wixel, all of them, all the Rangers said if those doors were locked, it would have made a difference. Since time is of the essence, those doors being locked would have made a difference, because you had 3 officers on that side. You had 3 officers on the side, on the west side, one with an AR-15, getting instruction from Claudia. He's going in the building. They're right there. And if you would have been locked out, you don't think that would have made a difference? But they have to ask you to ignore that. I don't know what you do with the school board on that. That's not what this trial's about. But you have to ignore that. They're going to have to ask you to ignore that. But it's not that important. It's more about Adrian. The classroom doors being unlocked. I'm sorry for what Mr. Reyes went through, but that door was unlocked, and it should have been locked. That would have made a difference, a key difference. And you know what really made a difference? If that door was unlocked, and those 3 officers in the corner followed the gunfire and made it in the west door, not drive around for whatever reason. You can talk about. I want to hear the excuse. Made it, and then the shooter's in the fatal funnel. This door's locked. Even if he got into the school, the classroom door's locked, and he starts shooting at the door. But then here's these 3 officers following their training, cutting the pie, getting with him, and then he's in the fatal funnel. That would have changed things. We can what if it all day long, but they're what ifing it, and they're asking you to make presumptions and speculate with Adrian, but they don't want to do it with anybody else. This is the hardest part of my job, because I have to sit down and I can't talk anymore. It's not that I like talking, I just have a lot to say. I get it. You can ignore me, you can say I'm full of it, that's fine. You can tell me after. But because the state has, the government has this burden that Jason went over, the highest burden in our justice system, the burden that the government has to prove to take away someone's liberty and change the course of their family's lives and that person's lives. And it's a burden that we all agreed was appropriate for the government with all their resources to have. They get to go first, and they get to go last. They gave us that sandwich. They gave us the burden of proof sandwich, okay? It's the other way around. And so I have to sit down and I can't talk. And please give Christina your attention. And she's going to make arguments to you. And you're going to see me in the corner, and I'm not going to be looking at her, but it's not to be disrespectful. I want to give her a heads up. It's because I get frustrated because I want to talk, and I got an answer, and I got a question, and I have an argument. That's just my personality, for good or bad. That's just the way God wired me, okay? But I'm going to be looking down and be writing notes, and my leg's going to be going 100 miles an hour. I already know. But you can ask yourself, not just what would Nico, Jason, or Gary say, but what did the evidence show, right? And I promise you, I'm going to do my best not to object during her closing. I will try. She can do it. I'm not offended by it. I'll do my best not to object, but listen to her, okay? And we're going to ask you now, I'm asking you to apply this burden, the burden that's the highest in our justice system, the burden that says not sure is not guilty, the burden that says, no, you can't take the person from the bottom of the totem pole and move them up and ignore all these things. You can't ask me to ignore all those things. Government, you can't. You can't ask me to ignore all those things and apply this high burden. The judge told you in the charge that if you have a doubt and it's reasonable, a doubt, one doubt, and it's reasonable, it's a not guilty. Just one doubt. Did they eliminate every doubt from your mind? I hope that's not the standard. If it did, then I'll deal with it. It'll be horrible, but I'll deal with it. But that would shock me, because that can't be the standard. That can't be the standard. That can't be the message, because she's going to come up and say, send a message. Well, but send a message also to the government. Send a message that, like Bill said in his closing, so we concentrated our case on the facts around Adrian Gonzales. Send a message you can't do that. You can't pick and choose. You've been given authority to steward well. People in our community say, steward this well, government. It's a huge responsibility. This is not how you steward it well. And if you apply the burden by law, if you buy the facts objectively, if you can acknowledge 2 things at one time, if you can acknowledge that families have been destroyed, because she's going to make an emotional plea to you. Everyone's cried, and you'll probably cry again. It doesn't take away something that my family's gone through or what they've gone through. If you apply them objectively and do what our founding fathers expected juries to do, we're asking you now, and we're hoping that you'll pick a 4-man or 4-person, 4-woman, and do a quick verdict, and a quick verdict of not guilty. Because the evidence has shown he's not guilty, folks. Thank you, and God bless you.
State.